talk about this. They changed the tie, and I've only just started the Kristen Robb podcast. I'm sure Kristen had great thoughts about it, and I can't wait to listen to it. But basically, Jeff says the premise is, and a revote, it's two people. They don't revote. I know they don't revote. I've been watching the show for 24 years. They don't revote, he says, because they can only cancel each other out. So there's no point. In this situation, Sam has no vote. Sierra, there's nothing like he could cancel out. So she should basically have like her vote to still vote. She did vote. Jeff doesn't understand the can of worms he just unleashed onto my life personally for a couple of reasons. Firstly, and Kristen talked about this, like that's not been true. At a 3-way tie, when anyone can vote anyway, they still don't vote. The premise has always been the targets just don't vote. And honestly, it's never really made a lot of sense. It's actually made less sense. This makes more sense. But we've had the wrong way to go about it, and we've always assumed that with everything. Now, I have used that in my life because it is possible I might overthink the show a little bit. But I've spent years, thank you, Taran, I agree. I don't really do it. But maybe if a little bit I do. I have spent years calculating what I call like vote anomalies or loopholes, revote loopholes. I did it last week. I said Tiana should play her shot in the dark because if she has a 3-2, she can't vote at the revote anyway. Neither can Gabe. They would win on a 2-1 because Gabe can't vote. That wouldn't have happened. That was wrong. Gabe would vote because she doesn't have her vote. So he would get the advantage of his vote against her. There is no loophole. It would be a 2-2. I did it last week. We did it years ago. 42, the Vati Tribal Council, the infamous pre-merge Vati Tribal Council, where are the votes? And Jenny went home. We all remember that. And one of the things we discussed was a loophole of if they could get, okay, so I'm going to set it up because this is years ago. But basically, Chanel and Daniel in the middle. Chanel loses her vote. They want to work with Jenny and Mike. Mike doesn't have a vote. So they have 2 votes on their side. Hai and Lydia are the people they don't want to vote with. They have 2 votes. And we talked about that if they really wanted to go with Mike and Jenny, they could try to get Hai and Lydia to vote for Mike. Because if 4 people aren't voting, Mike's not voting, Chanel's not voting, and the 2 targets aren't voting, if Mike can absorb being one of those targets instead of Jenny, instead of it being like a 1-1 of what ended up being Daniel and Hai, what we thought would happen is that it would be Jenny now would vote and Mike wouldn't vote. And Mike wouldn't vote twice, basically, as the target and having lost his vote.
Yes.
I'm spiraling, but it's making sense.
Basically, in a 2-2 vote, theoretically, each side loses one of those votes, and it becomes a 1-1 vote. However, if you burn one of those votes on somebody who already doesn't have a vote, you keep both of your 2 votes
them,
while the
and
other
it would have
side
been
loses
2-1.
their 1.
Yeah, then Jenny would have voted, and Mike would have lost basically both of their votes. He would have won both vote losses rather than being Mike and Jenny, and they would have won 2-1. But now we find out that's not technically what would have happened. What would have happened is Lydia would have been able to vote as the advantage that she is entitled to against the fact that Mike, as the person who lost his vote, didn't have a vote. So it would have gone back to the 2-2. We've spent years doing this. There's so many question marks. I want to talk about vote steals. I want to talk about this, and I want to talk about what they should do. But basically, my main takeaway is how much time I've spent calculating vote loopholes that didn't exist. And I just think, like, I could have learned a language. I could have learned another instrument. I could have done something with my life, but this is the reason I haven't. And it wasn't even true. And I'm just like, where am I? What's going on?
I'm here for you because I don't think this was wasted time, because I think that if you went into tribal council with that plan and production knew it, they would let you do that.
That is what concerns me. And that's bad. Because production, like, when did they come up with this? Was it last night when they thought, this doesn't work, and then they come up with it on the fly? Almost definitely. I mean, Christian said he didn't know that this was the rule. I asked Zach, Marianne, Oma. They didn't know. Imagine being Tiana going in with that plan. Now, like last week as an example about playing her shot in the dark, and then it is a 2-2. Now, that would be terrible, and maybe she should clarify. But none of us have ever felt the need to clarify because it felt like that was the global blanket premise of revotes. But I still think that them doing it because it's better TV and creating the rule just on that and the precedent just based on that, that's not the way to produce.
Well, I don't think it's even gonna be precedent. I just think that
how could it not be precedent?
In my mind, how this works is they were like, oh, it's gonna be a tie tonight. Oh, but one of them doesn't have a vote. Do we do anything about that? I guess because they just cancel each other out, you should probably just give the person who hasn't lost their vote a vote. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Let's do it that way.
But can I just say, and there's a few things I want to talk through. It does make sense. It actually makes more sense. I think the thing that people are taking away from this is completely inconsistent with what they've always done. True on the three-person vote, which to be fair hasn't been done there hasn't been a 3-person tie since Co-Wrong for US Survivor. But in Global Survivor, we've had this recently. We can talk about Global Survivor, but yeah, in 2021 in Brains v. Brawn, we had it. We had it in Return of the Outcast in South Africa. You don't vote as a target even in a 3-person tie. So it's inconsistent, so everyone's angry. They shouldn't have done this. Actually, the 3-person tie thing has never made sense. This is actually more correct. I actually do think that what they should do, what the precedent should be is, on a revote, everyone revotes, right? And yes, most of the time, almost every time, 2 people in the tie will cancel each other out. And Jeff will read those votes first, and it really doesn't matter. But then it plans for, especially in the new era when there's so many things flying around, it plans for all of these like tiny nuances, and those things are important. This thing's important here. What if Sam had lost his vote privately? Jeff, like he did in 42, would publicize that. That doesn't seem right either. Sam should go up to vote, and it should say, well, to be fair, this one actually was public. But if it was private, like, it's fine if I think it's like, oh, Sam's publicly lost his vote. He's not going to get up. He didn't get up in the first round. But if he got up in the first round and the voting parchment said, you've lost your vote, return to your seat, it would just say that again. And in a 3-person vote, then they can do what they want. And it means they don't publicize it. And it also means that, like, we can talk about it at a vote steal. That's going to go a lot better, because I want to talk about what would happen in a vote steal, because it has an Australian Survivor and it's really messed up due to this. But basically, if the premise is always that they're going to get up and vote on a revote, that actually would be better. And would we lose these fun little loopholes? Yes, we'd lose the loopholes. Okay, and I've had fun with the loopholes. And I've been like the biggest champion of the loopholes. But I think it's time to say the loopholes should be done. They should stop exploiting these things that don't make sense, because it's a flaw really in the structure of the game that we've been trying to exploit in fun little ways. And we have had fun, Taran. I have had fun doing it, okay? I've wasted time, but I've enjoyed it. But I do think that, we're 15 minutes into this conversation, I do think that in the future, what they should do is everyone should just revote. And it should go much more to the premise of what happened last night, which is that it doesn't make sense for the targets not to revote, because there are many ways in which it makes sense for them to revote on a tie.
Yeah, especially because if this is the precedent, then you, like, how it works if you don't have a vote is that you go to the voting booth and you're told you don't have a piece of parchment, you have lost your vote. And they do that because there's some element of like secrecy that you don't have to reveal the fact that you've lost your vote. But if you don't actually go up to vote because it's told explicitly to everyone, well, normally neither of you would vote, but in this scenario, actually one of you is going up to vote. It's like, well, oh, that only happens if one of us has lost a vote. You then immediately have now revealed that this person has lost their vote. So like, even in that sense, it makes sense to just have them always go up and cast their vote in a revote. And as I mentioned, it's a lot less confusing as well to not have to deal with all of the math and complications of who's lost their vote and why in the event of a tie, and how those numbers add up and how that tends to work with everything.
We did have fun with it though, right? But it should be done. I think the fun needs to stop, and we need to be revoting in a way that is way more simple and sensical, although less mathematically fun. In thinking about 42, I do think that Jeff revealed that they'd lost their votes when going to the unanimous discussion about like who could participate in that. And that is a hard workaround, because it's like, that is a public discussion. Mm-hmm. In this situation, what would have happened if Sam's vote was secret? And if they would have just sent him up there, it would have said, you can't vote. Well, they couldn't have done that. They couldn't have sent him up there, because the precedent has always been you don't even go up. So they would have had to publicize it, and that would have been wrong. So that even more lends credence to the fact that they should just go up there. Now let's talk about the vote steal. Jeff says that in a 2-person tie, then the targets don't revote because they'll cancel each other out. In a vote steal, that isn't true. So what would they do? And this did actually happen in Australian Survivor 2018. Try and paint this out, but Shawnee, Fenella, and Benji were in like a 3 to 5 person minority, and Shawnee stole 1 vote and took it to a 4-4. But we've always criticized Shawnee for stealing the target's vote. She stole Shan's vote. So instead of taking it to a 3-3, say if she'd stolen Shane's vote, an ally of Shan, she actually, on the revote, the 2 targets were on her side. It was Shan, which was now Shawnee, and Benji, who was on her side. So they lost what would have been 4-2 if Fenella didn't just like flip because the ship was sinking. So we've always criticized that it could have been a 3-3. It became what should have been a 4-2. But in this situation, what would happen? Would Shawnee still get to vote as Shan? But then would Benji get to vote? So does she get to the 4-4? Or does Benji not vote, but she still gets to vote as Shan, which is kind of unfair to Benji. So, that also doesn't make any sense. So then is it a 4-3? Does she not get to? What would US Survivor do in this case? Because it doesn't work. Because the idea in modern Survivor that two people will cancel out each other's vote in a tie often isn't true. Votes are way, way more fragile than that. And they got passed around and they're lost. And in the new era, this is going to be a big thing. And I'm so surprised it hasn't come up before. I'm actually really shocked by this. If you had asked me before, like gut check, has this ever come up that someone has been a target who hasn't had a vote? I would have said 100% yes. Clearly, that's not been the case. But now that we know it, I just think that the global blanket rule should be everyone will stand up. In a vote steal, everyone will vote. If they don't have a vote, they'll just sit down again like they do on the first round. It just makes so much sense. But anyway, my life is a lie.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it might have been this podcast, it might have been another, but I feel like when I've talked about revotes in the new era before, I have also had trouble in the past because it felt like the rules were inconsistent even before.
They were.
That they work on it are just strange. So yeah, I mean, it makes it very simple if we go with this logic, and then wherever votes go, they stay with that person. And, if you lose a vote, then you don't have a vote, but you still go up to vote. It's just a lot simpler that way.
We need to change everything. People think, oh, this is inconsistent. This is wrong. We need to go back to the way it was. No, it's been so wrong in the past that we're moving actually to something better, and we need to move all the way there because it's always been messed up. I will credit my brother, who was getting married in 2 days and still very kindly spent an hour on the phone with me about this last night at 2 a.m. Okay, that's the kind of family dynamic that we have. He has always said that it shouldn't be that way. They shouldn't lose votes. He's always said it. And I think everyone would agree. They should all re-vote in a 3-way tie. And it's always really annoyed him. And I've always said, well, at least we can have fun at the expense of the floor, exploit the loopholes, and do some math. And he's always said, don't come at me with that. That's not right. It's not what Survivor is. And I'm like, yes, it is. It's tricky math. Isn't that Survivor? And he's like, no, Survivor is about building things. I'm like, shh, 2 to 1 to 1. And that is the conversations we would have for years. And I think he has been vindicated because while it was fun, I think we do need to move forward. And I do think that, but Jeff doesn't know. Do you think Jeff knows there's a woman in Australia spiraling at 2 a.m. about this when he makes small decisions like this?
Jeff is just like, yeah, that makes sense. That's how we've always done it.
No, it's not.
And everyone's like, whoa, this is all messed up. But I feel like maybe we should, you know what, Jeff? Good job. You're right. You have always done it this way. Let's just keep doing it this way.
The funny thing about it is, even like with the vote steal stuff, we always thought like the vote steal didn't carry due to the fact that like Kellen forgot to use it in Ghost Island on the revote. Like even that was like, oh, now we're learning about what carries and what doesn't carry. And then it's like, how does that permeate against Global Survivor? And now we're learning this. And Global Survivor production did not know this was a thing, right? So like they've always had the premise that like targets don't vote on the revote just in general, not because they're canceling each other out, because that doesn't make sense with all the other stuff you've done at a 3-way tie. So, okay, I'm glad we're done, right?
Forge your own path,
No, global blanket rule, everyone stands up to vote. And if they can't vote, unless they're like not voting, unless it's like you are sitting out publicly. If you were whoever stood up the first time, stand up the second time. Yeah. Whoever's just stand up again, and then we'll just reread 2 votes. And then we'll move forward and we'll stop spending so much time on the podcast on the little fun anomalies that I think we enjoy. Did everyone enjoy what we did? We did it last week. What are the odds of that? Pretty high because I do it so often. So that's my life, Taran. Thank you so much for being a part of this.
Of course. Listen, I'm happy to be the recipient of this.
And that is how I would classify that as well. You have been receiving my hysteria. And I appreciate that.